There is another position being added this year in the stormwater fund. Right now, when you look at our tax examiners that are in revenue and audit, in the general fund, you see all but one of them currently, because we do fund one out of the solid waste fund, since we are responsible for putting out the collection of the solid waste fee alongside the real estate property tax. We draw upon reserve for one position from the solid waste fund to handle those activities. And we are proposing this year, because since we're adding the stormwater management fee to that part of the bill going out in January, that the stormwater fund will also have this will be a brand new position. We already have the one in there for solid waste in previous years. This would be a new one in the stormwater fund to take care of responsibilities on collecting the stormwater fee property. And pretty much other than that, the finance budget is same old, same old.
Thank you. Any comments? Any further comments? Go right ahead.
I have a question regarding what the president asked about the 3.2 raise. About 3.5. You said that everyone got the 3.5 raise and no more, but I see here administration assistant went from 40,000 to 46,000.
Which one are you looking at?
The page 23.
23.
And I do see here position change for ordinance.
And that may be where that comes from, that it has a different baseline as a result of that. Here we go, let me take a look.
Looks like a position change. Page 23, okay.
I will look into that, Ms. Atherton. We were not intending to give anybody specifically an increase above that point, and that one we might have missed that one. We'll look into it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from the dais? Mr. Drescher, go right ahead, sir.
Once again, if council doesn't have any more questions, if they do, I'd be happy to wait.
No, I asked anybody else?
Thank you, Mr. Greedy. I communicated with Mr. Arselt earlier today, so most of what I asked him he's aware of, so that hopefully he can give an informed answer. He did discuss the difference between the $3.4 million that's left in the POB account and the $3.9 million where the city's going to use to address the MMO. You've commented on the increase in building, plumbing, and electrical permit fees, and it'll be interesting to hear what Mr. Leitner says. I mean, barring an increase in fees, which would of course have to be done by ordinance, I can only assume that he's counting on increase in construction. We'll certainly have some this year with Mr. Riley's project at 8th and Hamilton going up. There's a new middle school going up, some of which I think we've already seen some fees from that. And the riverfront is expected to break ground for at least one building. I'm not exactly sure what kind of fees they generate, but those are certainly significant projects, and I would expect them to have a positive income. Once again, I'd certainly like to hear from Mr. Leitner on that. As Mr. O'Connell commented on the pre-sales inspections, that's a significant increase. We're in one of the hottest real estate markets now, and we're not coming anywhere near that number. So once again, unless we're going to change rates, I'd be interested to hear how he's going to squeeze that kind of money out.
And I will refer on that one to Mr. Leitner at his presentation. He's got the details.
Forewarned is forearmed.
Yeah.
And I had one more question regarding, at least in regards to revenue. Miscellaneous income, which is the 0006170. This account has been pretty much in a black box, and You know, if you go into Eden and you pull it up, it's 120 pages of 5 cents here, 10 cents there, and I fully admit, time being what it is, that I didn't look at every page. So, as I asked, if you can give us an idea what the source of these funds are, maybe what the 3 largest contributors are, I think that would help everyone.
And to that effect, Ms. Bowman sent you an email with respect to one particular item. If you haven't seen that, he's.
And I have, and my understanding is that was reversed then, so that really has no bearing on this.
There you go. Okay, we will follow up on that.
Okay.
You're right, that is essentially 120 pages of $5 here, $30 here.
And you know, they're all receipts, and you can't even follow a journal entry, so I'm really at a. I have some questions on the expenses also. Let me get to the right page here. In finance and administration, in the 46 account, consistently we've had a line item for forensic accounting. I note that we didn't use any in 16 and we didn't use any in 17. Do you expect that to change in 2018?
To that extent, we are keeping the reserve in there as a possibility of that for 2018. And I do want to say on that particular point, I was going back and looking through what we've done in 2017 in that particular item. And what I've noticed is there were some unexpected expenses that popped up in a couple of other places that we were able to use those funds to cover holes. There were some legal fees, I believe, and there were some issues with fire and parks. At this point, I think that reserve is, it may very well get used for that purpose, and that we may have, depending on what happens with where the mayor's race is going to go and who will be mayor in January, that at this time it's worth keeping in there.
Okay. Do we expect to use financial advisory services in 2018?
We are getting an RFP prepared. You may remember that PFM, who we had been working with, made a fairly nice sum of money off of that refinancing of the INISDA bond, and thanks to the legislation passed in Pennsylvania a year ago, anyone working with INISDA cannot simultaneously work with the city. So we have an RFP that we are preparing to go with on that, and I believe we've got 50,000 in the budget for somewhere in that range. Whether PFM applies and decides they don't want to work with INISDA anymore or somebody else, we are going to bring in a similar type consultant that will help us with our financing mechanisms, including making sure we get the short-term loan at the lowest price whatsoever. So that's on the plate, yes.
Just to clarify, you're suggesting that that would be paid out of this 46 account as opposed to a debt service account?
I had no intention of paying that out of the debt service.
Well, but there's money set aside in debt service for.
As a professional expenditure, that would come out as professional expenditures, yes.
Mr. Hartzell mentioned that some of the money from this account this year was spent on things beyond finance. About $95,000 were spent on other departments. Parks had an issue or two, and some for fire. And I think that in terms, and I certainly don't dispute the necessity of spending that $95,000. I just wonder if in terms of transparency, there would have been a better way to account for it, perhaps by a transfer approved by council, or transfers approved by council, as opposed to, leaving it in the Finance 46 account.
Those situations did pop up in the latter part of the year that were unexpected. You raise a very astute point, and I'm happy to have that conversation with the rest of council.
In the 50 account, also in your department, which is legal advertising, I know this year you haven't spent any money on legal advertising.
That is another place in which, you know, our legal fees from one year to the next can be highly volatile,
And not a fee, Mr. Hartzell, this is 50 is merely the advertising account.
Well, I understand. At this point, I still think that's an appropriate place to put that in.
And that's been done consistently.
Okay.
And just consistently, it's been significantly underspent. If we go over to the print shop, their 42 account, there's a charge for Varonis Network Security and a network security audit, and for the life of me, I can't understand how that would apply to the print shop. So,
We were also wondering about that one, and I think Mr. Liebert would have a better answer as to where the connectivity is on that.
Matt will be here soon enough. And I noticed they have a Canon color copier, and the lease increased from $19,000 to $29,000 in a year, or the yearly cost did. Is that a lease, or I mean, what's?
My understanding on the additional for the color printer is that IT had suggested that we needed to include that additional amount in the overall budget for it.
Is that based on usage?
I suspect that had a lot to do with it.
So we can get an answer from, at a future point in time.
Yes.
And if we can just jump to the debt service fund. Speaking of which, the 44 account.
What page?
I'll tell you, hang on for a second.
You're in the detail.
Yeah, I'm in the detail book. It's 187. You know, when I was referring to you know, financing fees, this is what I was referring to. Bond administration fees. I don't know that it would be proper to handle your short-term financing costs out of that. Well, you know, I understand what the account is. We've done some paymaster fees out of this, and I get that. My point is really that this has been budgeted at about $44,000 for the last 3 years at least. I didn't go back any further. In 15, we spent $7,000. In 16, we spent $7,000. And 17, we spent 11. And part of that was because we were paying costs off for prior years. And it's a $44,000 line item. Is there anything that's going to happen in 2018 that would change this pattern?
We have it at the 35. You know, we don't. How can I say this? That's with all the paying agent fees and any other debt that we would have. We keep it at that, but we only spend what we're billed for.
Right.
In the case where the debt company did not bill for those prior years, that did catch up for this year in 17.
Right, so we'll spend about $11,000 as opposed to $7,000. So, you guys see that?
You're thinking the 35,000 is a little bit on the high side?
I think the 3 accounts that I've discussed all show that,
Okay.
as a matter of fact. And I'm gonna say one more thing, how to do your carpet. And Mr. O'Connell knows this well. The administration building across the street has probably the most god-awful carpet in the boardroom. And it was in decent shape, but it was unattractive no matter how you looked at it. And I would never vote to replace that because I didn't think it was the best use of the school district's money. I note that I do not have a vote on Mr. Hartzell's part.
Well, you call it fortunate or unfortunate, the Finance Administration Office was just out of the downflow of the water pipe. And so we did not, shall we say, quote, benefit, end quote, from the damage repairs that were done elsewhere in the building.
You could have if you would have been, you know, use a little imagination, you know, a couple buckets here, a couple buckets there, come on, Brad, you could do this.
No, Mr. Grady, I don't have any more questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, Mr.
everything that I wanted to get to, and I hope I was able to answer your questions sufficiently.
Thank you. Anybody from the public in regards to, don't all stand up at the same time.
If the first thing that goes is memory, now's the time to prove it. PFM, again, was mentioned, and always brings to point about how well they were when we hired them to do the water deal. And so I would seriously think at any time that we contact them back to help us. The second thing is the EIT tax and the total amount and the percentage that the state pays and what goes into the pension fund, what slips on the carpet that they can't pick up to collect. I'm making a little joke there because the carpet's so bad, so when money falls on the floor, nobody hears it or it disappears.
Touche.
But in those things, we need the public to do our numbers. What Glazier just said was where we can do the 10% cut in the budget. Now, right now, the history that I started out with in the first statement was the $4.5 million that PFM said the city will be short on every budget. And guess what? It's proven it. The budget increased $5 million ever since they said, if you do what you do. The only reason why it's 4.5, because the $500,000 that went to the fee payers that we give the city made it the $5 million. Now, taking all that in consideration and all the things that were said here of the proposed budget, the money coming in, no one reports how much wasn't paid into the account from the last two budgets. And the example was the taxes that weren't paid or this weren't paid. We all know we're anticipating a big windfall, but in actuality, how many millions of dollars wasn't paid, and the program that they had to recollect the money has never been reported on. In other words, the last report we heard, there was $3 million on unpaid taxes, and we were paying someone $1 million to collect it. That left a few smidgens for us. So, I mean, there's so many questions that should be asked or be part of the report on where the savings could be. And that's why I come up here all the time when there's money to get interest on at 1%, but we give it away in a loan free, and the money seems to be stuck again, circling around in the same place, but going to different things depending on the questions we ask. So how are we going to get a true picture in simplified form to satisfy the public's interest, because we haven't had a cut? I mean, now we're from last year's budget, it's automatically going up 3.5% just on the issue of the wages. No one's doing a study if that's comparative to what's out there in industry, because when you screw up in industry, you leave. When you screw up in the city, you get reelected.
Remember, some of it.
Well, you got to put some humor here.
You're right. You're
I'm
right.
glad that you appreciate.
But remember, some of it is contractual, okay?
No, I understand, but I'm saying there's so many different things going on that we couldn't talk about while he was going through the things. You guys caught him on a couple of things where you got to ask questions, because the more that's given to you at the time that you want to ask a question, that goes, and then the next question comes, you have another question. So I'm just saying, there's so many things that have to be brought up. This is not a question on on their integrity. It's a question so that all these things get answered. Where's the pluses, where's the minuses? And what's really happening to the increase in the budget all the time. And no one even wanted to accept the idea that there should be a 10% cut. A 10% cut is only $10 million. We have statements here that people worry about $20 taxes on the water, on the rain tax. You made a statement, $300,000 at the other meeting. That's not too bad of a cost. I mean, this is the taxpayers. This is what the public is concerned about.
I mean, the more we can cut, the better we're gonna be.
And I hear nothing about anybody seriously talking about it or coming up with the suggestion of a 10% cut.
It's the first meeting, okay? It's the first meeting.
But there's no.
It's the first meeting. We have many more budget hearings to come up.
Let me.
We haven't made any amendments yet either.
Let me explain it, Mr.
Relax a little bit.
We are looking into this budget. We just had it. The mayor has not even presented his budget to us yet. Okay, he's supposed to be presenting it. However,
Wednesday. We're gonna be here Wednesday.
Wednesday, yeah.
That's the day after election day.
We are looking at the budget and we're looking at things. Today it's only the finance section of the budget, but we did delve into other things in the budget. You know, we're not out of the usual way of looking at the budget and went into the major, the general funds. But usually what we do is every department has an opportunity to present the budget. There's going to be a lot of questions to Mr. Leitner on his budget.
Well,
So today we're just looking at the finance. We did go out of the norms and looked a little bit into the general funds, but we're gonna have more questions. And there is gonna be more amendments to the budget, I'm sure.
And I'm agreeing with what you're saying, because the simple solution is, right now, we had the proposed budget. On Wednesday, they could come up and show us in the new budget where the 10% is. That's what I'd like to see.
Well, Lou recommended that about 20 years ago. Let's do a 10% cut across in the budget, across every line items. And we never did that, but he proposed it and probably has the same idea now.
Well, I appreciate you working on that. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Yeah.
Two questions. Number one, the reason I raised that question on the golf on the parking authority last time I was up here is because Mr. Hartzell got to report that Julio raised that they expect over $1 million from the parking authority, but Mr. Hartzell said they do expect the money, but in the budget they don't expect the money. The budget only shows they're going to expect $750,000, so Mr. Hartzell is right that we're going to get the money in the budget because it's incorrect, and there should be an amendment.
But when Mr. Hartzell said, Mr. Hirschman says, it's a projection. Sometimes you get a little bit more, sometimes you get a little less. So you get a little less, you get a little more, but it kind of balances out. That's what I think I heard him say.
It doesn't balance out here though.
I don't know.
We're $250,000 short on.
How much?
$250,000.
$250,000, right.
$250,000.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. 750 to 1 million, 250.
See, that's what my question was on the parking authority. Every year we get different numbers from them, but they promise us, and it seems that the promises aren't being met.
Well, last year, I think they were pretty well on the mark last year. 1.25?
But that was from Mr. Chairman, that was from, Mr. President, that was from the year before they owed us the money. And they just made up the money, and they're still behind. They're still behind. And my next question is, the deal with the mayor back in January about this personnel study. You've been talking about raises and stuff like this. When's the personnel study gonna be done? You budget the money.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Who budgeted the money? Council?
Which we back in January.
Let's go in
Or is that gonna be thrown to the wayside? There's never gonna be a personnel study?
No.
Not really. Not in my
Maybe
end.
not. Personnel study takes anywhere from 6 to 9 months
Hasn't
to do
been
it
done.
right, to do it right.
When you go out for it? When you go out for it?
Well, Mr. Hartzell,
Mr.
you wanna-
Greedy,
ahead.
if I may,
Go ahead.
there is a contract for personnel study.
Mhm.
And it's been signed, I don't know what the, I don't know what the timeframe is, and
I think they had their first meeting last week.
yeah.
So to do a good personnel study is a good 6 to 9 months. So that would be something that we'd be looking at implementing
My final question-
2019.
My final question is on the budget, Mr. Chairman. In 2018, Mr. Hartzell has assigned funds of $3.9 million. But if I look at this budget here, 2017, we have a,
What page number?
page 3, we have a
Okay.
total revenue assigned $102,417,000. But then you go down to total expenditures, we have 104,000, and if I take those two numbers, it shows we have a deficit of $2 million. So I don't know how we can get an opening
Yeah, I was looking at
balance
that
of
myself.
$3.8 million.
I was looking at that myself, I think he's
So
paying.
but my question is, how do we arrive at 3.9 when we show a deficit of more expenditures than revenue? Maybe you can explain.
Go right ahead, Mr. I think you talked about.
I have, but I'll give a brief summary one more time,
Yeah.
is that the budget for 2017, which had factored in a $3.6 million operational structural deficit, is only going to end up being about half that, so that's 1.8 million in savings, and that is why we only went down from 10.3 to about 8.5 as an expected starting balance for 2018. And as I had mentioned, the issue on the 3.4 versus the 3.9 is that there were other assigned funds that I have understood to that can be available for that purpose. None of that reserve, by the way, is included as part of our uncommitted fund balance. This is, again, a reserve that in fact has been used primarily to pay off additional pension obligation bonds, and we're now suggesting in this budget to pay off mostly the increase in pension MMO. So that's really all I can say on the subject at this point, but we're trying to get it covered as transparently as best we can.
The reason I say to Mr. Chairman, what Mr. Hartzell's saying is not what I'm reading. And if he's saying what he's saying and what I'm reading, then what I'm
What are you
reading should be
reading?
amended.
What are you reading,
So-
Mr. Richmond?
Huh?
What are you reading, Mr. Richmond?
The budget.
Yeah,
The
but
budget shows a $2 million difference. There's not a $3.9 million signed funds. So what I'm saying, what Mr. Hartzell's saying is not what you read. So what he's saying, if you're gonna read it, he has to do an amendment, so it reads what Mr. Hartzell's saying. So you haven't got a budget that Mr. Hartzell's saying.
he's talking, he said that he still has not got that.
Mr. Number one, he's talking about 3.9 million,
He
3.6.
talked about 3.4 and 3.9.
Show me where it's in the budget. Show me where it's in the budget.
Where it's at, the 3.4 or 3.9? Let's touch on the issue that has been a great consternation, I know, to Mr. Hirschman, and that I want to try to make as clear as possible. Reserves are not revenue. By whatever governmental accounting standards you have, revenue is new money coming in the door. And so drawing from reserves would not show up on a revenue chart. What we have done, however, if we go indeed to page 1, well, that's on the revenue side, we have indicated in addition to the 103.9 million in revenue, you will see on page 3 at the bottom where it says total revenue and assigned funds, which totals 107.8 million. Now, where's the difference? Go back to page 1. When we show up there, transfer from assigned funds POE, it's not revenue, it's a transfer, but that's where the hole is being filled, so that we have 107.8 million in revenue against just about 107.8 million in expenditures. So there's nothing being hidden there.
Well, that's what I'm saying is incorrect, because to reach that $3.9 million, you don't have it. And if you take those two numbers I just read, it shows a deficit. So, Mr. Hartzell, you haven't got a budget here. Last year you just put a fake budget together by showing, I don't have my old budget because you had a larger number for sales of property. And I don't have here with the sale of city property, 160. And then you put that big budget together with transfer of $3.6 million from cash reserves, which you don't have in this year's proposed budget. So I just hope this is not another fake budget that's been put together like was put last year. And can I have one more question? Since you brought up, Mr. Grady, since you brought up this Act 205 money, that Act 205 money, is that just non-residents or resident money?
All non-resident.
So where do I find how much Act 205, because you just spoke about Act 205 money, Mr. Resident, where do I find how much money we get under Act 205 from secret residents?
Let's go back to page 1.
Just tell me the number, that's all.
You wanted to know where it was, and I'm going to show you where it is.
Okay.
That is right off the get-go. It's account 2900, right off the beginning on page 1 under Earned Income Act 205. That is the non-resident EIT solely.
I'm talking about resident active.
That you will find under 2906, where the 26.1.
Well, how much of that 2906 is Act 205, and that's all right.
None of it is.
None of that. None of that is.
No, none of it
Okay,
is.
can I have those minutes in, Mr., because I'm gonna send it to your other journal's office with the other information.
Can I respond to something, Mr. Hirschman, as far as the parking authority?
Yes, go ahead.
There's never been a commitment from the parking authority on a certain amount.
Yes.
It all depends on the revenue of the parking authority.
Okay.
We happened to have 1.25 million several years ago, and so there's never been a commitment.
It's your fault, Mrs. Your part of Mr. Stafford, that's good to know. Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you. Mr. Hunsinger.
Good evening again, Quinlan here. I'm going to comment on the 3.5% raise across the board, because you know in the future, there's future years, it really wasn't applied across the board. The administration kept back money, and basically, in the vacancy report, where you have a director that isn't filled, they take that money, and there's nothing stopping them. And according to Susan Weil, she said, hey, as long as there's money in that account for that department, he can put it wherever he wants to. So people are getting more than the 3.5% or the 3% they had a year or so ago. I mean, it sounds good, everybody wants raises. I mean, something has to be done there. If you have the vacancy numbers that are sitting there and they're using those numbers, the extra cost of applying a percentage for raises, and it goes to a vacancy number, and then they use it somewhere else. Not everybody gets a raise in a city. I mean, I know people that didn't get them, even though they're, not everybody gets the raises that they say they're gonna go across the board. I mean, maybe there's a merit system that I don't know of, but there should be, but,
Well, they should get a raise if it is across the board. Everybody should get a raise across the board.
well, that's not what I hear in totality. Anyway, I'm saying,
If you know somebody, hold on, because this is serious. If you know somebody that did not get a raise, and he was raised across the board, you should bring it up to the administration of somebody here.
and then the guy upstairs will wanna fire him.
Well, I don't,
That's the way he works, that's the way he works.
It doesn't sound fair.
He's vindictive, I'm
I
telling you
want
right
to be as
now.
fair and as transparent as possible.
Right.
But if you know somebody who was allotted for a raise and did not get it, you should tell them. I mean, that's the only way we're gonna know.
I'll tell you next year. Or maybe it's Wednesday. But the thing is, the council has to address that, because what they're doing is misapplying this particular.
Yeah, but see, you know information that we may not know that they're telling you separately, privately.
Yeah.
And I'm asking you as the chair of this committee, if you know something like that, you gotta let us know, because we are the one.
Well, I don't wanna expose somebody and then it comes back to them.
Then don't bring it up, then, because.
No, I'm bringing it up as a factual thing to you, I mean, I can prove it.
Yeah, but how am I, well, I can't, because I don't know how it is.
I'm telling you, but
Well,
don't have to go any
I
further.
think you're gonna answer.
You don't have to go any further than what I told you.
I know, but that's
What
what.
one will see in the detail on the budget is that you did put out the one exception up, which I need to take a look at, but you will find that every position that is non-bargaining has already been factored in with a 3.5% increase compared to what's the budget for that position this year. And the intention of that is that we pay that entire amount and do so to every individual who gets that additional increase.
Well, let me ask you one question. what has been the raises in the last 3-4 years for non-bargaining people in the city? I mean, last year we had, what, a 3%er?
3% last year.
And this year you have another 3.5?
3.5.
And what was the year before?
That's what's proposed, the budget.
I know it's
has passed.
proposed, but where are they getting this from? I don't think the industry's paying this kind of money.
Well, you know, they
And then
get
when I
it from
see
the revenue that we have.
the revenues,
The revenues that we're getting, I mean, that's.
he's
where the
borrowing
comes.
money, he's borrowing money. How can you say the revenues? Where are they
Well, the
where's
money
it coming
being,
from?
the money that he mentioned is borrowing is for capital things and for all the things, not for raises. You don't borrow money for raises. Nobody
It's
does
going
that.
into the sausage fund. It goes in there and that's where it comes out.
Yeah. I'm just saying the way things should work.
Should work. This ain't the way it should work, the way they're presenting this
No,
stuff.
no, I'm saying you don't borrow money for raises, you borrow money for capital projects.
So why shouldn't employees get a raise?
Say again?
Why shouldn't employees get a raise?
I didn't say they shouldn't get one, but what percentage? And what is the national average? I'm not, if you have all the money in the world, okay, give them whatever you think you can afford to give them. I'm not saying it, the bargaining unit gets 2.5% next year, why did you keep them at 2.5? What's the matter with that one?
But that's, remember, this is what it's proposed.
This is proposed,
Okay, it's
Well,
not
I'm just
necessarily
saying.
what's gonna happen at the end, perhaps, it could change, I don't know.
So in 2 years, if they get the 3.5 this year, they'll have a 6.5% raise in 2 years. Did you get a 6.5% raise
I
last year?
wish I did.
Yeah, I'm not getting, well, we're gonna double our salary, the triple H's are gonna double their salary.
You should, you come here now.
Maybe we'll get 10%.
Social
What was the
Security,
year
though.
before that? What was it the year before that? What was the last raise before,
Okay, it was like 1.5.
70, 16, what was the raise before that?
We increased it last year, because the proposal was what, if we took it
Well,
up
last year, this year, we increased it.
No, that was part of the compromise last year. We took it, what was this, it was suggested
I
at what?
believe what we had in the budget was 1.5.
Well, yeah, we
We
took
have
it
ended
up
up
to
with
3%.
3.
What year?
We played Santa,
Last year.
yeah, we were Santa Claus last year.
Yeah, but last year, for this,
coming.
last year, for
No.
this year.
Yeah, no, I know that. It was proposed last year 1.5, and we gave the non-bargaining people 3%.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. And this year they're going to 3.5.
I know, that's what
proposed.
he just said that.
But then you might want to give them more. If you go from what past experience, if you said you gave them an extra 1.5 last year, they asked for 1.5, you said you gave them 3?
Yeah, no
Well,
problem.
maybe you want to give them another 1.5 on top of their 3.5 that they're asking for.
Maybe I will make an amendment. Maybe I'll give them 6.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, not for the tax bill.
All right,
Yeah, that's okay.
all right, let's move forward, let's move forward.